So I'd like to welcome you to the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. My name is Carrie Sparavon, even though I don't have a little plaque out here today, but that's who I am. And I chair this committee. Please, everybody, turn your cell phones off or turn them on vibrate so they don't disrupt the meeting. If you'd like to provide a public comment, there are speaker slips somewhere in the back of the room, I believe. And if you can give those to Ms. Sewell, she will get them up here to me. Ms. Sewell, can you show everybody who you are? There she is. This meeting is being webcasted, so just be aware you're on camera. If you do want to speak, even if you're just giving a little brief comment, can you please come to this forward table so that you're on mic and on camera for the webcasting? There's a new procedure for votes on the full board and committees of the medical board. So any items requiring a vote will be done by roll call. This means that once a motion is made and seconded, Ms. Lowe will call a vote by calling each one of our names on the MAC to actually give our vote. You can vote in favor of, against, or abstain. And if you haven't read the material or are unsure, an abstain would be a good idea. Does anybody in the audience have any questions regarding anything I've just said? Okay, great. I feel like I need to move over because this mic it's not in the right place. How's that? Okay. All right. Ms. Lowe, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Burns, Ms. Ehrlich, Ms. Marcelin, Ms. Webster, Ms. Yaroslavsky,
Present.
Ms. Sparavon.
Present. All right. Do we have a quorum? Thank you. I just want to mention up front that item 11 was a presentation that was going to be given by Diane Holzer on best practices for home to hospital transfer. She's at a birth, so we're going to put it forward to the next MAC meeting. This is the time for public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Please note that the council cannot discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section that's not included in our agenda, except to decide whether or not to place it on a future agenda. So is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? Great, seeing none, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the December 4th Midwifery Advisory Council meeting minutes.
So moved.
Edits were asked for by Natalie ahead of time, and no edits were provided. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second. We have to have public comment. So is there any public comment on this agenda item, the meeting minutes from the last MAC meeting? Seeing none. Ms. Lowe, will you do the roll?
Ms. Ehrlich, Ms. Marcelin, Ms. Webster, Ms. Yaroslavsky,
Aye.
Ms. Sparavon.
Aye. We should all have a little green light showing. Great.
But I'm on, okay.
All right. So the next item is the chair's report. And I'm not going to say a whole lot right now because I have a whole lot to say about the LMAR, and I'm just going to hold it for that. I would like to say that for various reasons, we may need to move the August meeting. And since it's not on the agenda today to move the meeting or discuss it, I'm going to ask that an interim meeting be called by phone in the next month to discuss it. And Ms.,
So what do you want to discuss? You want to discuss having the meeting?
I want to discuss moving the meeting from the current date in August.
We can't make that discussion today.
Nope. Sorry. Anybody have any questions? Because that's my full report at this point. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move forward. So item number 5 is MAC membership. Ms. Lowe, I'm going to turn it over to you.
First, I'd like to provide an update regarding the existing positions on the MAC. At the last meeting, an update was provided indicating that after review of documentation maintained at the board, it appeared that multiple positions were either expired or would be expiring in the near future. At the January 29th and 30th quarterly board meeting, it was requested by board staff that all positions on the MAC currently would be extended for 1 year. The board agreed to that and approved that request. So based on that information, I just want to publicly state now what the term expiration dates will be for the current MAC members. Ms. Sparavon and Ms. Yaroslavsky's positions will expire June 30th, 2015. Dr. Byrne, Ms. Ehrlich, and Ms. Webster's will expire June 30th, 2016, and Ms. Marcelin will expire June 30th, 2017. So with the extension granted, the 2 positions that were coming up for expiration in June of this year were advertised via the board's website. A letter was mailed to all licensed midwives, and an email was sent to those on our subscribers list. Today, I'll be presenting the applications and requesting a recommendation by the MAC that can then be presented to the full board at the quarterly board meeting in May of this year. Based upon the board's decision at the quarterly board meeting, the approved applicants would then be seated at the next MAC meeting. You've all been provided a copy of the applications that were submitted, and there was a second packet that was emailed to you that were provided after the meeting materials were sent out. The first vacancy is for the licensed midwife position. That is a 3-year term, and it will be set to expire June 30th, 2018. 3 applications were received at the board for this vacancy. And excuse me if I get the names incorrect. Ms. Farron Jones, Ms. Angelica Nugent, and Ms. Carrie Sparavon. At this time, if any of the applicants are in attendance, it is custom to provide them with the opportunity to address the MAC and provide a brief statement and to introduce themselves. Is Ms. Jones or Ms. Nugent here? Ms. Sparavon, would you like to make a comment?
Yes. I have really enjoyed my position on the MAC. I like working with all of you on the MAC. I like interfacing with the community, and I would really like to continue for another term, which might be my last term, but there's so much afoot right now that we're in the middle of working on and moving forward that I'd really appreciate remaining on the MAC for this next term.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll proceed with the nomination. Is there a nomination from the MAC to recommend one of the licensed midwife applicants to the full board to fill the vacant?
I would like to recommend Ms. Carrie Sparavon to that position.
And is there a second?
Second, several seconds.
Okay. And now we'll open it for public comment. Seeing no public comments, we will need to vote. And again, we'll do the roll call vote. Ms. Sparavon, you will abstain, yes. Ms. Ehrlich?
Aye.
Ms. Marcelin? Ms. Webster?
Aye.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Aye.
So based on this, we'll present to the quarterly, or at the quarterly board meeting to recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will move on to the vacant public member vacancy. This is also a 3-year term that will be set to expire June 30th, 2018. For this position, there were 6 applications that were received at the board. Ms. Wendy Askew, Ms. Tashina Benning, Ms. Ann Doan, Ms. Whitney Smith, Ms. Dawn Thompson, and Ms. Barbara Yaroslavsky. At this time, if any of the applicants are in attendance and would like to make a statement, you can come forward.
Hi, I'm Tashina Benning. I've applied for the public member. Oh. I'm Tashina Benning. I'm here to apply for the public member opening. I have a both professional and personal interest in midwifery care access in California, so I would very much appreciate the opportunity to sit in the opening until expiration.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wendy Askew, and I'm here today representing myself, asking for your consideration to serve on the council as a member of the public representing consumers who are my peers and other women who I work with as a volunteer in the state of California. I've been engaged in the birth world through my mother for my entire life, but do not work professionally as a birth worker or in the birth field. However, I do volunteer on different agencies and nonprofits that are doing work to encourage consumers to gain information about their options for midwifery care and maternity care in general, as well as working in my own local community to increase access to midwifery and increase access to generally all options for women to receive quality maternity care that they feel is appropriate for them. I have in the packet, you can see my resume as well as some letters of recommendation that people I work with professionally have submitted. And I do want to say respectfully, I was unaware that the sitting member was interested in continuing to serve, and had I known that, I probably would have not applied, but it is something I am very interested in, and if it isn't appropriate at this point in time to replace the current sitting member, I absolutely understand, but would be interested in being considered in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yaroslavsky, would you like to make a statement?
Sure. It's been an honor for me to serve on this committee. It's been a long time coming. I remember the beginning when we started with the different divisions within the community as to what was appropriate, what wasn't appropriate, and my interest has been more from the perspective of trying to get everyone at the table to elevate the profession to a profession, to have some checks and balances, and for it to be accepted as a alternative method for those that are interested to have a safe and healthy birthing experience. So I would look forward to continuing to serve. I apologize for the lack of any detail in the application. At the time, I was probably holding a brand-new baby grandchild, and dealing with one hand working and one hand not working is always a challenge, so my apologies at the shallowness or the thinness of the application. I think that this committee has really come a long way. We've made some changes. We've made some culture changes on the medical board as well, where I serve, and I have to applaud those that have participated and continue to participate. That's enough, yeah?
Thank you. So at this time, is there a nomination to recommend one of the public member applicants to the full board to fill the vacancy?
I'd recommend Barbara Yaroslavsky.
Second.
Sorry, who seconded?
I did.
Karen? Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments? Then I will now take a roll call vote. Ms. Ehrlich?
Aye.
Ms. Marcelin? Ms. Webster?
Aye.
Ms. Yaroslavsky? Ms. Sparvan?
Aye.
We'll make that recommendation.
May I make a comment?
Please.
Yeah.
I don't know how to turn this thing on.
Here, I'll get it for you.
Thanks.
I would like to thank all of the applicants who sent in paperwork, who are showing such interest in this committee and in the work of midwives in California. I was incredibly struck by the quality of the women who applied. I wish we could have you all on this committee, because I think you have an incredible amount to bring to us. And there was a bit of a conflict even in myself, as much as I want Ms. Yaroslavsky to continue with us, because you blew my mind. I hope you will continue your interest in midwifery in California. I hope you will continue your advocacy, and I hope indeed we will see you here again. Thank you.
Josie?
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, and I think it will soon be time for some new ideas and younger women. And everything Karen says, I just want to second, because she just got her microphone on faster.
You have something else, Karen?
I also just want to let people know, my term will be up in June of 2016, and it is my plan to not reapply at this time. So I would like the midwives in California to know that and to really consider coming forward and being a part of this council. It's an incredible opportunity. It's incredible work. It's important in California. It's important within the medical board. And indeed, maybe we can get some younger ones. Us gray hairs are fading to an extent.
I guess I'll just echo what Karen and Tosi have said, but I'd also like to add, I don't think either of the midwife applicants are here, but the consumer applicants are here, and there is a lot of work to be done both statewide and nationally where your talents can be used. CFAM in California, the Midwives Alliance in North America, or Citizens for Midwifery, which is the other consumer national organization. Please consider volunteering your time with them, because none of these organizations have giant budgets.
And we need
and
you.
we really need people that are dedicated and as educated and in touch with this work as the two of you are. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so that's that agenda item, right? All right. Okay, so now we get to do the licensed midwife annual report. I just have to say at the outset here that this was an incredibly time-consuming process. Karen and I both felt like it didn't make any sense to put a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage, and so we really went through it with as fine a tooth comb as we have available to try to fix what realistically could be fixed. That said, our overall recommendation is still that we should seek legislation to move to the Manistats database. It's developed by professionals who understand data collection, and it's run in a manner that makes the data clean and completely collected. And that's not going to ever really happen with the LMAR the way that it is. So I'm going to move forward now that I've said that, because that's sort of the disclaimer to all of this. We need a legislative fix for the following two items. We need to change the wording of the place on the LMAR that asks us how many clients we served with collaborative care. And we rather feel like this section could be changed to capture the data on consultations and referrals in another way on the reporting tool. The question regarding how many clients were served under supervision is no longer required by law since supervision was removed.
But is still required by the law as it is.
Well, it's still required to be on our LMAR, but we don't have to have supervision anymore, so it's sort of like, doesn't need to be there. The biggest suggestion we're making has to do with the reporting of deaths. As you all know, there are multiple places on the current tool where you can list a death. And that means that the numbers don't add up, and it looks like there were more deaths than there actually were. So the biggest recommendation is to confine all the information regarding deaths in a completely separate section so that no deaths will be reported anywhere except in what I'm calling Section X. If you want to see a really difficult listing through of what we're actually planning on collecting there, you can read Appendix A. But the reason that Appendix A is written the way that it is because I wanted to be able to have something to hand to the coders who are going to change this tool that would make sense to them. And so while it will make sense to most of us, I think it will mostly make sense to somebody who's writing computer code. For each item that has a definition, there needs to be a pop-up box that automatically comes up whenever you put your cursor in the box to enter data for that item, so that it's not, you don't just kind of scroll over it with your mouse and maybe it'll show you and maybe it won't show you. That as soon as the cursor is entered, you get the pop-up box with the definition. We're recommending either removing or somehow changing the requirement to report by county. It way too easily identifies who the midwife and her client are, especially in counties with low population. We have so few poor outcomes that to list by county on this tool really kind of eliminates the anonymity that was originally suggested for this tool. The general workings of the online tool, some of you know that I've never had to fill this out before because I wasn't doing any home births, but I had to fill it out this year. And one of the things that I found was that as you went through and you started putting zeros in, and then you got to the bottom where it says no data to report, there's a little button down there, you can't click that button until you go back and remove all the zeros. So the recommendation would be to, if the answer is 0, let us put a 0 there and get rid of the no data to report button. It would also serve the purpose of you'd actually have to read every item as you went down the page so that things weren't missed. I also noticed that in some sections you could actually enter zeros and it kept them, and in other sections it didn't. And a lot of the time if you put zeros in, when you went to print the form, the zeros didn't show. So that's another place that needs to be fixed. I also noticed after I printed my form, after I'd submitted everything, that the comments that I had made as I went along didn't come forward on my printed form. They're not there. I don't know where they went, but they're not there. So we need to correct that. And in regards to that, when we get the report from OSHPD yearly, we need to see those comments as the MAC as a whole. We need those to come forward. We need to see what they are so that we know where things need to be changed. And the ideal, of course, whenever you're collecting data is that you collect it in a prospective manner rather than a retrospective manner. It also would be easier to be able to enter our data as it occurs rather than waiting till the end of the year and having to troll through 30 or 50 or 80 births that we did and gather all this data. Another plus for the MANA data stats. So regarding client services, section D, I don't know, Natalie, did we print out, we didn't print out the LMAR form, did we? So nobody has it to really look at? Okay, sorry. I should have asked you to do that. I didn't think about it. We're requesting a wording change. Line 14 says number of clients who left care for non-medical reasons. And sometimes we don't know why somebody left care. If we can't get a hold of them, they've just disappeared, basically. So I would change the wording to the number of clients who were either lost to care, who left care for non-medical reasons. And the definition of lost to care is clients who never returned for appointments despite efforts to contact them. So there'd be a little pop-up box that said, this is what this means. Line 15 is the total number of clients served whose births were still pending on the last day of the year. We recommend removing that. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's not required by statute, and it confuses everybody. The change we'd recommend for line 16, which is the collaborative care question, is change it to the number of times referrals were made and acknowledge that there might be more than one referral per client, and then include reasons for the referral from the list we're currently developing in regulation. That might make this something that needs to be incorporated in coming years since we haven't adopted that regulation yet. And then remove line 17, which is supervision. Outcomes, section E is the outcomes per county in which birth, fetal demise, or infant or maternal death occurred. That's the way it's currently done. Our recommendations would be to remove everything from that section that refers to deaths. We currently have to keep the county because that's required by statute, but we would recommend removing it at some point when we have to open the law up. And so then this section would have the county, would have the number of live births for each county, and we'd also like to collect data on preterm births before transfer to care, after transfer care, and number of low birth weight infants under 2,500 grams, and that should also be delineated between out of hospital and after transfer in hospital. Section F is the outcomes of out-of-hospital births. Line 21 refers to breach, and we'd recommend splitting that into delivered out-of-hospital and delivered after transfer, because once in a while we're going to show up and catch a breach because the baby's coming so fast we can't transfer, and it'd be nice to capture how often that's occurring. Line 22 is VBAC, and we're going to recommend a separate VBAC section, and I'll get to that in a minute. Line 23 is twins, and currently we're collecting data on both delivered out of hospital or none delivered out of hospital, but not one delivered out of hospital, and the other one, and transfer for the second twin, which I think is probably important information to have. So we're recommending that line 23 collect data on both delivered out of hospital along with the outcome. Let's put the outcome there, okay? Unless it's death, and that's going in a separate section. One delivered out of hospital and outcomes for both babies, and transferred in both outcomes. And then higher order multiples. I don't know that anything's ever been filled in that section. That would be triplets or quadruplets or quintuplets or whatever. So we should be collecting data there on all delivered out of hospital with the outcomes, one delivered out of hospital, or more than one delivered out of hospital. We're not recommending any changes to section G. Section H, antepartum transfer of care for urgent reasons. We're going to remove line 52, which is fetal demise, and put it in the separate section. Section I, which is intrapartum transfer of care elective. Line 64, multiple gestation. Remove it and capture that data in section F, which I just went over. Section J, which is intrapartum transfer of care urgent. Line 76 is multiple gestation. Remove it and capture it again in section F. Sections K, L, M, N, we don't have any recommended changes there. Section O is birth outcomes after transfer of care. We recommend a change in the directions for lines 116 to 131 to read, for any mother or infant who transferred care as reported in section I, J, K, L, M, N. From the licensed midwife to another healthcare provider, please provide the outcome information regarding the mother and the infant in the spaces provided. Deaths will be reported in a separate section. And so then line 119, 126, 127, and 128 all relate to deaths, and those will be removed to the separate section. Section P originally captured more data on outcomes, and because we're capturing that in section X for deaths and in section O for other outcomes, we thought maybe we could make section P for VBACs. There's a lot of discussion around whether or not VBAC should be a reason to refer to a physician as we're crafting the regulatory language. And so as we went through this, we realized, we don't really have data specific to VBAC, so why don't we collect that? So we can collect things like the number of planned out-of-hospital VBACs at the onset of term labor or term rupture of membranes, number of completed VBACs out of hospital, number of completed VBACs after transfer, number of cesarean sections after transfer, number of diagnosed uterine dehiscence, which is where the scar separates a little but not completely, and the outcome, but morbidity only, not death. We're going to get the deaths in section 8, X. And then the number of diagnosed uterine ruptures and outcome. So that, and we can consider capturing data on one prior cesarean in a VBAC or more than one prior cesarean if we want to. And then any complications leading to death related to VBAC will be captured separately in section X. Then we get to section X, which is completely delineated in the Appendix A, but this is just kind of the overview. So it will capture all deaths, fetal, neonatal, and maternal. Each death will be recorded individually, not as an aggregate. So a midwife will say, yes, I had a fetal death, and then it will collect all the data for that one death. And then it'll say, did you have any more deaths? And it will keep going until all the data is collected individually for each death so we can really understand what is happening rather than having it reported as an aggregate that doesn't really give us any really good data. So it will capture all the components that are asked for in the law. The highlights are the number of pregnancy losses from any cause prior to 20 weeks of gestation. If we wanted to, we could separate that into spontaneous to therapeutic, therapeutic for medical indications or fetal anomaly if we want to. That's a further discussion. Number of fetal demises prior to the onset of labor or after rupture of membranes without labor, between 20 weeks and 37 weeks, which is the designation for preterm. We could, if we wanted, capture the exact number of weeks gestation. The number of fetal demises prior to the onset of labor or rupture of membranes after 37 weeks. The number of fetal demises between 20 and 37 weeks that happened out of hospital. The number of demises during labor after 37 weeks. And Karen and I talked a lot about making our statistics come in line with national and international standards when it comes to discussing neonatal and infant deaths, and currently they don't. We've just defined it as a death that happens of a live-born infant before 6 weeks. So we're suggesting capturing deaths in the first 7 days of extrauterine life, deaths between 7 and 28 days of extrauterine life, and the causes will be captured with these. The number of maternal deaths, which is defined internationally as the death of a mother as a result of pregnancy, in other words, while pregnant or within 42 days of the end of the pregnancy. And then a separate line for the number of fetal demises of any category that were diagnosed prior to labor by a physician who were subsequently delivered out of hospital by the licensed midwife by maternal request, so that we can see how many of the previously entered things, how many of those women are choosing actually to deliver at home. We're going to capture data on whether or not the death was attributable to a diagnosed anomalies that were incompatible with life. Complete information on VBACs that resulted in the death of a mother or an infant, the complications that contributed to the deaths of mothers or infants, and the place of death. Was it out of hospital or was it after transfer? I'm not going to go through the appendix. Y'all can read that one on your own. Are there any comments from the council? Natalie?
I can wait until the council makes their comments if you'd like.
So I want to compliment the both of you for the time and energy this must have taken to pull this all together. It's quite amazing. It's quite a job and quite a task. What I would like to ask, though, is about the opportunity that when the form is being filled out, there's some mechanism by which the form cannot be continued to be filled out if certain squares are left blank.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the number one thing, that the form be completed in the pop-up, and it pops up and says you either need to, you need to go back and.
I think it'll take you back to where you didn't fill something in.
The other question I had was on the on section D, client services, line 15, where the question was about the last day of the year if the pregnancy continued on through to the next year. Is that what that's referring to? Because my concern is.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so I have,
So you're not-
on December 31st, I have 6 people that are still pregnant. Those will get captured the next year.
Okay, when it comes to having year-end statistics, is this something that it all could be gathered in progress kind of, would you ever need to have it? And I don't know the answer to the question.
We thought we might need to have it, but in practicality, with the tool we have, it serves practically no purpose. It's
All it
just-
does is it confuses the midwives also in trying to keep track of who's still pregnant at the end of this year, and now, okay, did I report this person last year, or do I need to report her now?
As long
or
as you
what's-
guys are all square on that, I'm fine with it, just as long as
it really doesn't serve any valuable purpose.
Okay, so thank you, those were my 2 points.
Thank you.
I have other questions. Ultimately, the purpose of the LMAR could serve more than one purpose. And I think we should keep the counties in there and report in the counties. This morning, I was probably the only person who had a birth in Colusa County, and the Colusa County Birth Certificate Office lets me know that every time I go, every 2 years for the same people. But if we wanted to use LMAR to find where are the underserved areas and promote midwifery in those areas, that might be a secondary use of it. I find it remote, but it could be.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Could the purpose be served that you're requesting by just having an item where the midwife could say, how many clients did you serve in each county that you served in?
Well, isn't that the
And with-
same as the
Well,
births?
no, because
Because then you're getting back to that, how many people are we taking care of who didn't deliver in that year?
okay, well, it could be, yeah, but some of them might terminate early or whatever. I'm wondering if we could capture the county data without having it tied to a death is my big thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, okay. Well, it's just one little thought. I have some more thoughts, though.
Okay.
On the referral to another care provider, there should be some acknowledgement. I mean, yes, there's acknowledgement that multiple referrals might be made to one particular woman in our care, but are we talking about breaking that down to referral to what kind of doctor, or only the doctors, referrals only to the doctors that might take care of somebody with those risk factors that are going to be identified by our regulations. For example, if I have somebody with blood pressure problems in a previous pregnancy that are no longer there, I'm going to refer her to, but could show up later in her pregnancy, I'm going to refer her first to an acupuncturist, because that, in my practice, has been proven to keep her from developing high blood pressure. Is that the kind of referral that we're going to talk about? Because they can be MDs or not.
I think what we were wanting to capture there was, how often are we referring as required by law?
Okay, and then the other thing about that is acknowledging that the referral made does not mean the referred person actually went to the referred physician. We can only do so much, and perhaps there's a lot of referrals that we make, and the mother has the entire right to say, no, I'm not going.
Yeah, again, I think it's to capture what are we doing that the law requires us to do. It doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not the woman actually goes. I mean, in an ideal world, it would be nice to know whether she actually went or not, but she may not even tell us.
It would be an interesting data. And then the other, on the breech mode of birth, thank you for thinking to include that, because, yes, I have had twins and breeches that are surprises to me. But is there a way to, is that set up so that we can capture whether the baby was born by cesarean or vaginal birth when after the transfer?
We could add that.
Yeah, because it wasn't really clear
it's
the way
not-
I read it, because it's not on a
Yeah.
actual tool like that. So those
Yeah.
were the things that I had just thought of as I read your
The same for
excellent
twins
document.
then, right?
Pardon?
The same for twins.
Then the same for twins.
And I have some thoughts.
I mean, because we are doing them with vaginal, with the VBACs.
Right,
So we might as well do it with the other
good idea.
fringe elements.
On the first page, under the general recommendations, you're saying that removing the requirement to report by county would require a legislative fix. If we go ahead and recommend that, it just needs to be moved up into the legislative fix recommendation section.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Under general recommendations.
Yeah.
We're talking about remove the requirements to report by county. This will require a legislative fix. If we go ahead and recommend that, it's just logistic, move that up to the
Right.
legislative fix
Well,
section.
yeah, it was,
Because-
it's still a question, though, whether we want to
Right,
remove it.
and I understand that.
Yeah.
I think in talking about what Tosi is saying about Section E, we are asking still in Section E about the county of live births.
Right,
So we can capture that
Oh,
there was only
okay.
one birth in
Sorry.
Colusa County
Oh,
in
that's
the
right.
entire
Okay.
2 years that you're talking about. It's just that we're trying to take deaths out of that section so that we don't run the risk of
I
duplicating.
see, so you're only trying to take the deaths out of the county reporting,
Correct.
not the live
Not-
births.
Correct.
Okay, it's, until you work with the tool online, it's hard to see.
It's hard to see when we're trying to make the fixes.
Exactly, exactly. That's what I mean.
I understand wanting to find, to have the information here for twins and breaches and higher order multiples. And I wonder about having it on the report, given that it is now fully against our law, that we do them. And yes, we can have surprise ones, and I wonder, it's a hesitation I have. We talked about this when we were
Yeah.
putting it together, and I still don't know. I would like to not change, I want Carrie to hear this. I would like to not change the title of Section P to vaginal birth after cesarean. I have spent years now compiling the data onto my overview report, And I really would prefer that if we are going to have a VBAC section that is only VBAC, that it be its own section. We could call it Section
Okay.
V instead of Section Q or whatever.
I'm not wedded to the letter.
I understand.
I was
But-
just thinking there's a section P there that's going to be empty now, so we could stick something there.
But we could also just put something on there that Section P has been retired. And I think that
Works.
in terms of the overview that I would like to see continue to be done, there's going to be enough that's going to have to change in the overview, given the changes in the data fields, that I think that making Section P have two different functions will be.
Works for me.
Then on the
Section
last
B.
page, I am still, I'm still not sure that we need to ask about abortions.
Well, I'm not asking
they're-
about them.
Pardon?
I just noted that we could if we wanted to.
That we
but
could if we wanted, and
Yeah.
I'm saying I have hesitations about that.
I think there's probably a lot of people here that have hesitations about it.
And I know that knowing where we have incompatible with life anomalies could be interesting, but I don't think that it's meaningful in any way for how licensed midwives are doing our work in California.
Given the discussion we had at the regulatory hearing about whether or not we should refer somebody to a physician for consent about testing when they'd had a prior,
Miscarriage?
or a prior anomaly that was incompatible with life, maybe we do want to show that we do take care of these women and we're doing an okay job.
Well, I think it's a discussion we need to have
Yeah.
further. And then in number 4 on the last sheet, fetal demises from 20 and 07 to 36 and 6/7. We say nowhere anything about going past 42 weeks. And didn't we talk together about somehow showing if we have women who go past 42 weeks?
One of the ways we could solve that is just, since they're going to be entering data individually for each case, we could just have a field that says, what were the gestational weeks at the time of the demise?
But these are only demises, that's right.
Yeah.
This is the demise
Or
section.
so, I mean, we could capture it
Maybe
that
what we
way.
need to do is figure out somewhere else in the document to capture any LM attended births past 42 weeks, which again, it's now against the law.
I don't know that
and
we
I
want to
don't-
go there, Karen.
I know, but we don't want to go there with breeches and twins either,
Yeah, well,
which are
breaches
now
and twins
against the
are a
law.
surprise.
Yeah,
If
they
she's
can
over
be.
42 weeks, it's not such a surprise. At least it better not be.
It could happen in the same way. You could go to check on someone who you were going to continue her care in the hospital,
Oh,
and
that's
you
true.
agree to go, and she's precipitating on you. But I had a question, too, about something you said about fetal demise that was subsequently delivered at home after a diagnosis by a doctor. And I just want to say, in my experience over the last 20, 30 years, things have changed a lot. And we used to have doctors who would, one of these demises we found in the doctor's office, and he said, go home and do whatever you want, or come back if that's what you decide. And now, even if we've asked a doctor, women who really want to go home, have never had a hospital birth, are really afraid and want the comfort of birthing their baby that is already dead in their own home. And the doctors are just very resistant. And I don't know if other people are finding that too.
I think this is another of the patchworks across the state, because I have heard other instances in which that has indeed happened.
Yeah.
And this could be an interesting bit of information to inform what we ask in terms of support from the medical community.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been times, and one of the things that I want to add in here is if it's an incompatible with life anomaly, and we know the baby will die but is still alive, that is another time that some parents are choosing to stay, to go home, to go back to their homes and have what they then call their sacred birth of their baby who just did not make it.
Yeah. Well, that data we will capture.
And
Because
where-
there is a place to capture that there was a diagnosed anomaly incompatible with life, whether it's captured before the birth occurs or not.
I just wonder whether in number 9, if we didn't say number of fetal demises or conditions incompatible with life diagnosed by a physician who were subsequently delivered out of hospital by the LM.
I think then it gets dicey because you could have an anencephalic baby, and most people would agree that that's a diagnosis incompatible with life, and sometimes they live for 6 months. And so then you've got that statistics in our desks. I don't know. So here is the main problem with this. The main problem with this is that none of us have degrees in doing this, in gathering this kind of data. And this is why we need to move to a national database that people are writing that do have degrees in this,
Right.
who do understand how to write these questions, who have really vetted the data collection tool that they're using. And there are peer-reviewed papers written on the data that was collected through the Manistats database. They're published in national medical journals. And, you know, we can sit here and have these kind of conversations about what we should capture and what we shouldn't capture and how we should capture it
And we
till the
still
cows
don't
come home, and we're still going to have a tool that's not as
sound.
good as it could be if it were written by a team of people who were educated and skilled at making the tool.
I would like to.
I think Monique had something to say, Karen,
Oh, I
just a
just
second.
yeah, go ahead.
had one thing. I just think that if you want to capture all the deaths in a separate section, just to have reminders in all the other sections, just very clear reminders, otherwise I think you might get some duplicate data.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I-
Barbara?
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone that the purpose of having the data collected is so that not only midwifery participants around the state understand what's going on, but the medical community understands what's going on. And it's a very much of a delicate balancing act. And you better remember that very, very definitely. So all these little ins and outs and what ifs and stories are irrelevant. So the idea, if you can get it to fill this through and go to this national combined with these kind of things, I think you need to start moving it forward. You're going to also have to work with it to see. I mean, nothing is set in stone,
Right.
other than the legislative changes and fixes that will be taken care of. But the sooner this can happen, the better it's going to be for the profession.
Yes.
So what I'd like to recommend, since we can't vote on sending this to the full board today because it wasn't noticed in the meeting that way, I'd like to, in our interim meeting that Ms. Lowe is going to fix for us, that we have another MAC meeting before the July medical board meeting, which is at the very end of July, so that we can make good recommendations to the full board for moving forward in either fixing some of this stuff now and or strongly recommending that we reconsider reporting to the Manistats database. And my thought is to see if we could get Missy Cheney, who is a PhD professor in Oregon, who is the head of the Department of Research for
Division.
MANA, and helps write this stuff and understands it so that she could do a presentation to the full board. Because I know in this room I'm sort of singing to the choir. We all know that, you know, moving to Manistats is really the way to go. But the people that need to understand that is the full board, so that then the full board will possibly move forward and ask the legislature to make those changes.
Harry, what is the hesitation with moving to Mana? What's the board's hesitation?
The hesitation has been I've heard two things. One is that we shouldn't be reporting to our professional organization, but I think at this point it might be argued that MANA is broader than that. And the second thing is that when a death is reported to MANA on the MANA stats, they have a team that gets in touch with the midwife that reported it to make sure that it was reported correctly. Anything the midwife originally reported stays. It still can be looked at, it's still there. What they're doing is making sure that the data that comes out in the final actual report is the data that is true and correct, rather than the midwife hit a wrong button. And now with the way we're reporting with the LMAR, there's no staff to do that.
So let me ask you the question. Currently, the statistics are going to OSHPD, aren't they?
Correct.
So then the MANA statistics would be reported back to OSHPD?
Yes.
So instead it would go that way instead?
It depends on how the legislature wanted
yeah.
to make it work.
That's the expectation of what the expectation we're trying to do. So let me ask you a question. With this recommendation that you've put so much time and energy to, is there any benefit to having this go out to the midwifery community to take a look at this, to ask for additional comments, or this is?
I think there is benefit in that, because we don't know at this point whether we're going to ever move to using the amount of stats, and we have to make the tool we do have
Work and
as
possible.
good as we can, and at least be capturing deaths in a way that we're not double capturing them.
No, I understand
You know?
what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to understand from the process perspective. If this is going to have to go to the full board, prior to going to the full board, it should go to the community to make sure that this is done. And prior to that, you have to disseminate that.
Yeah, well,
So I'd ask for
so-
comments, but isn't that what interested parties meetings does do?
And
Isn't
So
that
we
what
could
you
do
guys
that.
did do already?
If
We
I
could-
could jump in here for
Please.
a second. So first of all, some of the issues that are relating to the technical issues for the system, that's something that's not regulated by the law or the statute. So for the issues that you were having with the online system, medical board can already start working with OSHPD to get those issues taken care of or seeing what our options are. As for this entire document, I think that board staff and legal counsel basically need to review this line by line to ensure that items that you're requesting to be removed or added are still in compliance with the current law. Then the next step would be to work on the actual language to present to the full board to move forward, because we've looked it over and there's some issues with how things are written, and they would definitely have to be
I'm sure.
cleaned up a little bit and detailed out. But I think that obviously there's still a lot of questions to be answered before it moves forward, and I think we should take a look at this line by line first and make sure that, some of these requests are just, if they're not even possible, we need to get them off of here. Once we can do that, then we can present it to the public to review and give the board feedback before it moves forward.
Yeah, but the concern I have is the timing. The longer it keeps going on and keeps going on, nothing happens, and no changes are made. So I know that they've spent a lot of work, time to get this far. You were not part of that discussion, I'm hearing? Is that what I've just heard now?
Right, the task force was
I'm just asking the
outside of
question.
staff.
Okay, so
Right.
now the appropriate thing would be for this to go to staff, and let's say within a specific amount of time, it also at the same time going to staff, or first staff and then go to the broader community? I mean, how do you want it to work?
That is how I would see it happening, is we need sufficient time to be able to go through it and make sure what you're asking for is actually legal and matches the law and the requirements. And then if it does or it doesn't, we could then move forward with how we want to present it to the full board and get input at
But
that
there's-
time.
But there's in
Okay.
between.
Right,
There's
there is in between
okay.
time.
And my concern is that what would be a reasonable expectation from this group sitting here, since we've heard all this information now, we're pretty much in agreement of where it's going to go, a week, 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 months, 3 months,
I think it would
a
be
year?
at least a few weeks for us to
Okay.
review this and get outside input if needed on some of the items.
The outside input, wait a second,
Okay.
The outside input is going to come from midwifery organizations or from legal? Well, I'm trying to figure out,
I would see that we would go back and board staff would review it, and we would obtain some input if a medical medical expert was needed to define something or determine what category it should fall under, we may ask for that input as well as the midwives. But I think that at this point, moving forward with this document as is, or even presenting it to the public as preliminary as.
Way too early, it's way too, so
Right.
would you say a month is enough time?
I think that hopefully would be sufficient.
Okay, so a month, I'm just trying to work backwards. So
I
that
get a
if
timeline.
July, time-wise, so that if that was then the end of April, that you would have May then to have whatever is necessary.
Prior to the next board meeting.
Right.
The other thing, though, is if it should not work out that way, I don't think we should necessarily proceed rushing through this to get it to the next board meeting, as we've been waiting
I'm thinking more
years
July, not
for
May. Yeah.
this first step to be done. So
Yeah, so
We'll hope for
there's,
that.
there's one more little monkey wrench because OSHPD sent me the MOU it has with the board, and they have to have changes by the 1st of September, and they only provide 40 hours a year of tech support. So that's also something that has to be figured in terms of the costs of doing this.
But if they're
I
not the
would-
first go-to.
No, they're not, but it has to, if we're going to change it for the collection of data for the 2015, they have to have the changes by September 1st.
But yeah, we're still in
Okay.
June and July and May.
Right, so I would think, okay, so legal's going to look at this, staff's going to look at this. That may take a month, 6 weeks, whatever. We're going to try to move the August meeting up to before the July board meeting, like to either, June or early July, so that then we can vote on whether we want to send whatever final document we come up with to the full board. There may or may not need to be a task force meeting between staff looking at this document and the next MAC meeting. Is it possible to make that happen before all of those things? Could all of those things come into place in time to present to the board the 30th of July?
I would be hopeful that we could do this by July. I think May is probably cutting it a little too close. For
No,
the
I
next
don't,
meeting.
I can't do it by May. Don't try to make it happen by May, please.
Well, wait a second, wait, I was not saying that you have to do anything by May. I'm talking about what staff has to do.
Right.
Staff has
Yeah.
a document here in front of them. They have legal that has to go through it, I understand that, but staff has to go through this. You've done this part.
Right.
The back end is when you get involved, so don't.
Right, no, she's just saying it can't go to the full board by the May
I-
meeting. And
I-
because I'd be the
no,
one
we're
that'd
talking
have to
about-
present that, and I,
We're talking
yeah,
about the July board meeting. I
Okay.
thought we were never talking
Okay.
about the May meeting, ever.
okay.
I just
wanna
May
be
was
sure
a
we're all
date
on
that I
that.
wanted to have this done by staff, that was all.
Got it, okay. We're all,
So we'll take it
Okay,
back
something.
and review our priorities and get to work on it.
any more comments from council members?
I would like to clarify one point that was made before, which is when we first began looking at the possibility of moving to the MANA stats, what the imagined pathway was that MANA would do its prospective collection as is their system, and that then there would be some special page that they generated in the Division of Research that would give the California LMs what they need in order to then go and submit it to OSHPD. The California LMs, as we were imagining it back then, would still have to do the ultimate reporting to OSHPD, but they would have, it would all be based on what they had been doing all year long.
One of the issues,
That
though.
would, that would be if we didn't have a legislative change to do it differently. We could ask the legislature to simply have us submit our data to MANA, and MANA could then give the California statistics to
Would
the
indeed
state.
be a legislative fix, but my understanding was that we even needed at least a regulatory change in order to move to prospective reporting with MANA, with the MANA stats.
Well, it's not regulatory, it has to.
No, I realize that. I'm just saying, no matter what we do, whatever we decide, there's got to be some step, some process that is going to involve not just us.
Right.
Right, and I'm just trying to clarify that, because Barbara asked about how, if indeed this goes to Manastats, how would it go to, would it still be going to OSHPD? According to the current system, it would, because that is what is in state law.
Right, but we could change the state law so that some staffer at the medical board could download all of California's data, and that'd be that.
So the OSHPD would be secondary.
Or OSHPD could be eliminated.
It is possible, yes, but I would also then like to add that that is another of the legislative fixes that we
Right.
are asking for.
Well, but we're
based
not
on all
asking
this.
for it yet, Karen, because we're not talking about in this document moving to MANA.
Ultimately, I think it's a
Right.
legislative fix we need to ask for as often as anybody will listen, so that it starts to actually move forward.
I would like to interrupt just for
Yeah.
1 second here. I'd like to remind everyone on the council that the MAC did present to the full board the idea of pursuing the option of MANA, and that was denied by the full board. So
Thank
at
you.
this point, it's not a matter of whether or not the MAC wants it or not, it's that it didn't move forward. So if that is still consideration that you are wanting, you're going to have to pursue that option through other means, basically by representing to the board with new and additional information to support your
Right.
cause.
Which
I'm
is-
going to tell you,
Thank
the board is going to support whatever is best practices. So in order for us to figure out what best practices is, this has to be fixed and regulated,
Right.
and not regulated, but looked into, and staff has to do due diligence. So before the cart gets before the horse, or the horse is going out the barn, we need to be, respectful of the process. And that's all I'm trying
Yes.
to understand, that staff get together with whatever needs to happen to make these recommendations come forward. Whether it goes to MANA, whether it goes to OSHPD, really is not the discussion this second.
Right.
But it will only be able to go to the MANA data if if all of the stuff is on the table and OSHPD can't do it. So it'll work out. So all of this is like,
I would just like it on record that the Midwifery Advisory Council wants us to move this whole system to the MANA database. That's what I want.
I think that's happened though.
Yeah, we've done that. And it actually is in this report, Karen. It's the first line.
Yes, I know.
It's
I
the first
realize
line.
that.
So-
But
Is
I know that.
there any comments from the audience? Sarah Davis? I don't have any of the speaker slips up here, so I don't know who's filled one out or not filled one out, but.
Sarah Davis with the California Association of Midwives. I think your legislative fixes are done. 2516 3B and C are not, they don't refer to supervision or collaborative care. It's just the number of county of live births and demises by county. So I think we did it already
Then I've
in 1308.
explained more. I'm not catching you.
You suggested that we needed to delete 2516 3B and C,
Yeah,
but if you look in code,
I don't have code in front of me.
they're not that.
Well, they were when I copied it and pasted it into this document, unless I was sound asleep when I did it. Do you have it, Carrie? 8-point type.
Sarah, could you repeat which section? I have it in front of me.
2516
3B.
3B and C.
Here, it's this part here.
It says the number of by county of live births attended as primary caregiver.
Right, so
Okay,
in the process of AB 1308, we did remove references to collecting data on physician supervision and collaborative care because we didn't need it anymore.
then I don't have the current thing. Okay, so wait.
I haven't
one
done
more.
my 2014 Elmar, but I'm assuming that they're still collecting
Still there,
it.
it's
Yeah.
still there.
Right.
So I have another question. That got removed. I never saw that language ever, but I believe you,
I mean,
because it's in the
a
book
line-
over here.
It's a line through, you just
Okay.
miss it.
So, all right,
That was my comment.
okay. Well, so they took those things out, and they said we could add data elements that bring us in line with MANA, but we can't delete anything else, correct?
That was my understanding.
I'm just wondering what else was deleted that I'm not aware of.
Nothing.
Okay.
And
I'll change-
before it goes
I'll
too far,
change
some of those discussions should probably be offline.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Thank you. Are there any other comments from the audience? Okay.
Hi, I'm Laura Marina Perez. I'm a licensed midwife in San Francisco. I just had a couple of recommendations and a couple of questions. I just did my form last night, so it's very fresh in my mind. For Section D, line 14, I would recommend the number of clients who left care in the antepartum period to clarify that that's what you want to capture. Only that and not intrapartum or postpartum. And then with, I believe it is Section O, if I'm correct, that's the section that also asks about complications after the outcomes of transfer of care. And I think it would be lovely to have what you were referring to earlier, Carrie, about that being defined. What, if you can, what do you mean by complications, given the choices that are there? I don't know if it's exactly that section. There's one section where it talks about complications.
Leading to demise.
Are you
Maybe. I don't totally remember, but.
okay? Section O
Sorry.
captures outcomes only. It doesn't capture complications.
Yeah, there was another section at the
And-
very end that it had several columns, but the heading
Section
was
P.
about complications. And it had the list of complications, which
Yeah, like
may be about infant and maternal
that's,
death.
that's
but-
Section P,
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
and Section P's gone.
okay.
It's
And then
history
in
because
terms of the fetal demise, the way it is right now, the question I have is, it asks you to track the fetal demise that was discovered in your care as a LM or not. It was discovered in the hospital. So just wanted to make sure that I'm not sure what we want to capture, but I know that was a little confusing to me.
the statute, and I might get corrected again here, but I don't think the statute specifically says that we have to capture it while in your care.
The language on the form does.
I know the
Yeah,
language on the
yeah.
form does.
Yeah.
The way that we'll still capture that is where did the demise occur? Obviously, if it's in the hospital, you didn't discover it.
Right, right.
If it's at home, you discovered it. If it's out of hospital, you discovered it. We probably need to add language to make it clear that if you went and you didn't get heart tones and then you went to the hospital to get an ultrasound and the ultrasound showed that there was a demise, that really you discovered it. I'm not sure how it's
Exactly.
another pop-up box with a
Mhm.
definition so that we're all reporting the same way, because I think now it's very open to interpretation by the individual midwife.
Exactly.
And I mean, I had one birth to report for last year, and I found myself kind of second-guessing some of the questions and going, what does this mean exactly? And I only had one, so, you know.
So the last question I have is, actually, I think it's before Section D. The very first question you're asked is, did you provide midwifery services or midwifery care, comma, to someone who was potentially going to have a baby this year? So I wasn't sure if that question also wanted to capture LMs who are providing well women care as part of midwifery services that want to be captured, because that wasn't clear to me
Well, it was
either.
one of my questions too, because I provide well woman care, and it isn't required by statute. The statute was written to capture data surrounding pregnancy and birth. I think we may want at some point to at least have a question, how many women did you serve this year who were not pregnant, who came to you for basic well woman services? It's not in this report because I just focused on
So
what
I
we've
think
currently
that
been
it
capturing.
should probably say that came to you for midwifery services and we're expecting a child. So, because right now that and isn't
yeah,
in
okay.
there, so it's not, you're not necessarily knowing that you're not including women that you provide mobile women
Midwifery
care for.
maternity care services.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Any other council members that have any other thoughts? All right. Okay, so that ends that discussion, and we have a plan for moving forward. The next item on the agenda is the update on midwifery assistant legislative proposal by Ms. Simoes.
Hello. So if you turn to tab 7 in the packets, there's a copy of the bill that was introduced in February, SB 408. So the bill it's actually set to be heard in B&P committee on April 6th. And really right now we're just working with some interested parties who have raised some issues. And so we're kind of working on tweaks in the language related to some of the services that are allowed. Some of the language in there is kind of broad right now. It says, for
I'd be
example,
happy to help.
yeah, well, yeah, I may come to that. We actually met with, had a meeting yesterday, and I think we can work it out at this point. But if I do need your help, I will definitely ask you. But
Please.
hopefully we can get those tweaks made, and the bill can actually be heard on April 6th. So it's moving right along, and everything seems to be going pretty good. So
Ms.
Very good.
Simoes, I would really like to ask that anytime midwifery-related legislation is being discussed, that there be a licensed midwife in the room.
Well, no, okay, so how it goes is it's our sponsored bill, so we're going to have meetings with the author's office, with just us and the author's office, but we're going to meet with all interested parties, so that includes,
Okay.
like in my meeting yesterday, Sarah Davis was
Good.
in there for part of the time.
Thank you.
But part of the time, it's going to be with the other side, so when you sponsor a bill,
Okay.
we have to meet with those that have issues, and sometimes those are separate meetings, and then we meet with those that, may have issues with the people's issues, so it's kind of a collaborative negotiating process. So we're kind of, but sometimes even as it goes through the legislative process, sometimes the author's office may make decisions that, we don't necessarily have. So
I recognize that.
yeah,
I
at the
just-
bottom, it's their bill, we're the sponsors, but we definitely work with all parties involved, and we know that obviously licensed midwives are a big party in this, so we would never leave them out of the conversation, so.
It sounded at the moment like that is what had happened, and I just wanted to make sure.
It couldn't really
Thanks for the
happen like that, it wouldn't
clarification.
make it through the process, so.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, we'll be sure to keep everyone involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any comment from MAC members? Any comment from the audience? Seeing none, we're going to move forward. This is an update on implementation of Assembly Bill 1308. Ms. Webb, please.
Thank you. As many of you know, we held interested parties meetings on October 15th and December 15th of 2014 to discuss language for the regulations needed to define pre-existing maternal disease or condition likely to affect the pregnancy and significant disease arising from the pregnancy. This is under Business and Professions Code 2507. And I felt that the discussions were very productive, and the biggest hurdle is still that there is a great divide over whether midwives can assist their clients with any VBACs without a prior physician consult and determination by the physician that the risk factors presented by the client's disease or condition are not likely to significantly affect the course of the pregnancy or childbirth. I've been informed that ACOG's position is that no VBACs assisted by midwives should be performed without first having a physician consult and determination. And I've heard a lot from midwives and consumer groups that they've taken the position that midwives should be able to assist with certain categories of VBACs without a prior physician consult and determination. at an impasse right now, and continuing to reach out, hoping that there will be some movement. Resolution on that issue is still in process.
Can I suggest perhaps we can do like we do for the, I'm not saying I would like this, but as a negotiating tool, we are now required to recommend that people in our care go to the hospital and pre-register. But in my practice, nobody does that, even though I recommend it. We could use a word like that and perhaps satisfy the doctors. It's just a thought, that the midwife must recommend that she see a doctor prior to taking on her care as feedback, but nothing obligatory, because women refuse to go when they don't want to. And we've taken enough away from the consumer's actual participation in the choice-making around their birth already with the legislation that we've recently passed. I'd hate to take away more. Just a thought. A bone.
I'm hopeful that if we have a separate section for capturing data on VBACs in the LMAR, that may also provide a bargaining chip, because right now we don't have clear data. We can extrapolate from the data we have that women aren't dying and babies aren't dying because women are having VBACs at home without a physician referral first. We can pretty easily look at our data and say that that's very unlikely to be happening. And I think that a strong case can be made for continuing with the recommendations that we had in regulation as a result of our standard of care being adopted in 2005. There's a whole regulation that dictates how we are to care for women who have had a prior cesarean section. And I think that there's really a very good case to be made there that nothing has changed since we adopted that regulation. There's no new data that shows that regulation is no longer valid, and it's been working for midwives, but particularly for women. And as we have heard in the interested parties meetings, there are many places in this state where a woman's only ability to have a vaginal birth after a prior cesarean is at home with a licensed midwife, because the hospitals in her area will not allow her that choice. And without really solid evidence that we're putting women in danger by not requiring a physician referral, I think we need to be very careful how we proceed with that. There's just I haven't seen ACOG offering up anything that shows conclusively that without a physician referral first, women are at danger by only seeking care from a licensed midwife. And it is the job of this body to protect the public, but not just to protect the public from doing things that may harm them, but to protect their rights as autonomous citizens to make reasonable choices regarding their health care.
In other words, it's a civil rights issue.
I'm sorry, but it is. It's a social justice issue. It's a civil rights issue for women. And it has to do with the autonomy of our bodies. You know?
But the reality of the situation is that you have rules and regulations in place. In order to change those rules and regulations, you have to move to a position where you're getting the data and the information so that people that understand why the request is being made or why the situation should be different needs to be different. So all the conversation is not going to make that happen.
No, I'm suggesting that ACOG provide that data to change the regulation that we adopted in 2005.
And that
That's
has
my
worked well for 10
suggestion.
years. And in fact, the data that exists shows that it was completely reasonable.
Yeah,
It
and
was reasonable in 2005, and it's reasonable in 2015.
the only reason we have to have this discussion at all is because AB 1308 overrode the section of statute that created that regulation. So now the regulation is defunct, not because anything happened, it just, you know, we have to rewrite it. And the suggestion that I'm making is that let's just rewrite it the way that it was originally written, because there's no evidence to change it.
So Carrie, that makes a whole lot more sense than having this whole discussion.
Yeah.
So let's move it to that point versus second guessing why or why not.
Thank you. Does anybody from the audience want to address this particular issue before Ms. Webb moves forward? Just be sure you state your name for the record.
Nancy Greenwood, registered midwife from Canada. There is a new position paper out from the American Association of Family Physicians on this issue that maybe could contribute to the discussion.
You have a copy of that? I mean, do you have, okay, so it's right there, but Ms. Fairbaugh needs to see it, or somehow you're going to have to.
I'll give you my card.
Okay, so somehow it needs to be shared, is all I'm suggesting.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Webb.
So we, in our interested parties meetings, did so much work on 2507 that we still need to have a further interested parties meeting on 2510. That's Business and Professions Code 2510. That is the transfer form. And there's a basic form in use now for when a client needs to be transferred from a planned home birth to a hospital. And the board does intend to hold further interested parties meetings in order to modify the form and officially adopt it into regulation.
May I make a comment here? My understanding had been that we were hoping that the transfer form was going to refer to whatever the list is that comes out of regulations, so we can't really complete the form until that regulation is written
No.
and passed.
Elmar, the Elmar
The
data
standard,
terms.
the guidelines is what we were going to use as reasons to code it rather than the new regulation.
If there are far more of them than there would be in.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So the outcomes that were going to be on the transfer reporting form are going to match up to the outcomes from the LMAR. That is what was discussed and agreed upon at some point. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Else?
Any comments, Sarah?
Sarah Davis, California Association of Midwives. Just wanted to ask if prior to the next interested parties meeting on this, if staff could provide a report about the reports that have come in already. Found that really helpful last time, and I'd love to see how that's evolving through the year.
We'll probably get that in program update, maybe? Okay.
When is the next interested parties meeting?
I don't think there's a date yet, is there?
There's
No.
not a date set yet.
Okay.
And then Business and Professions Code, Section 2513, regarding the challenge mechanism. There is a challenge mechanism available, but clinical experience may no longer be substituted for formal didactic education. The board did send out letters to the two schools that have provided challenge mechanism pathways in the past, asking for how they intend to comply with this section. And Maternidad La Luz has provided information that appears to show it has an appropriate challenge mechanism. A final stamp of approval needs to occur. The other school has not responded yet, despite several requests for how they will be in compliance. So that is still in process.
So Maternidad La Luz appears to be in compliance, and you just have to put it before the board? Is that the next thing that happens, or?
It's been reviewed by staff. It has to be reviewed by legal.
Okay.
And have the final.
Okay, so after legal reviews it, then it'll be done. It doesn't have to go before the board again? Okay. Thank you. Is there any comments on this? Laura?
Laura Perez, licensed midwife. Sorry, I meant to ask before about 2510. Is there a current process whereby the hospitals are aware of the form, they're getting the form, they know to fill out the form? I don't know if there is a process, and I would love that information to be shared.
I think that there is a process. Are you running into particular problems with the hospitals that you work
No,
with?
I think it's more about clarification that it's in fact the hospital's responsibility
It is
to
the
fill out the
hospital's
form. The
responsibility.
midwife,
Absolutely.
nothing to do with it, but they should be aware that that needs to happen, basically.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of the challenge mechanism, if I'm understanding correctly, you're just asking for the schools to say this is how we're assuring that there's been didactic education, correct? I mean, in a nutshell.
Right, and to ensure that they are in compliance with not accepting clinical experience
Or
based
didactic.
off didactic.
Okay, so maybe we could all encourage NMI to submit the paperwork, since they're the only other ones with a challenge mechanism, and they're the only ones that have a mechanism at a distance. You have to go to Maternidad La Luz for, I think, a year or something ridiculous to do it. So we can all work on making that happen. Any other comments? Okay. Excuse me? Yeah, come forward, though. Use the mic. State your name again.
Nancy Greenwood, I'm registered midwife in Canada. So my question is for people, like, I have a 4-year bachelor's degree in midwifery. What does the challenge mechanism look like for me in that case?
It looks the same as it would look for anybody else who didn't go through an approved midwifery education program in the United States. We don't currently have a way for people coming in from outside of the country to just present their education and have that accepted. I am right about that, right? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing nodding heads from licensing back there. There is no other way but to go through a challenge mechanism. So we need to...
Should be an in-between somehow.
The problem is that the way the law is written is that the school has to be approved by the board, and it would be very difficult for the board to be approving schools that are outside the U.S. I mean, it just would be...
Yeah.
They have a hard enough time to do it for medical schools, and
But we also have reciprocity with different states.
Only 2?
I know that, but there's only 2 that we've worked on over the last 30 years.
Okay. Well, no, it isn't exactly true, Tosi, because I've run into this question already. And the truth is that if they were licensed in another state, say Washington, by means of rules that fit our law, then yes. If not, then no. So it's not just that they're licensed in Washington and they have reciprocity here and can get their license here. Can you explain it better, Natalie, please? Thank you.
Well, perhaps at first there was only one mechanism, and now there are more.
That could be.
For example, Washington.
Natalie is better at this than I am.
Okay, so Business and Professions Code 2512.5, which is the qualifications for midwifery practice and licensure, states, Section B, which would be your reciprocity, is that the pathway would be successful completion of an educational program that the board has determined satisfies the criteria, and current licensure as a midwife by a state with licensing standards that have been found by the board to be equivalent. So you still have to meet the educational requirements.
Right.
Basically, this would be exempting you from the examination requirement.
And it says a school that we've approved, correct?
Correct. You still have to have the education and you have the license. It removes that examination requirement that comes before that
I
section.
have to take the NARM again,
Right.
basically.
It's not a true, you have a license, you're equal to our license, and we grant it to you. Education is still a factor. Does that help clarify that?
But that could be done in, say, I just remember when we did it the first time, when we were looking for states that actually met the same criteria that California did, and we identified Florida and Washington. Could that same procedure not be done for different provinces in Canada, for example?
Possibly, yes. However, it would still go back to the education being required. Because if you have a
Yes.
license in another state,
I agree.
as long as it's through, your education's through an approved program, that's fine to meet that requirement. But if out of state or out of the country, there's much less likely chance that they have gone to an approved school.
Right.
So
So
if we
it's not
open
going to
up
help
that-
this woman
Could
sitting in
they-
front of us,
Yeah.
for
Right.
instance.
So we could find that your province approved your license and it has the same licensure requirements as the Medical Board of California, which is, we could put that on the list of schools considered, states or territories considered approved. But she would probably still not meet the requirements for the education.
Right, we'd have to approve her school.
Right, which is the bigger issue, because then if this school is approved, there's less likely a chance that reciprocity would even be an issue, because they would fall under a different qualification.
Right.
Right.
And so how do schools get approved by the medical board?
They would have to submit an application and all their documentation to meet the requirements, but currently, we are focused on, or we've issued approval for schools within the U.S. only.
Right,
For
but
midwifery.
that doesn't preclude a school from Canada, where at least they speak English, and it would be an easier sort of transference of information for a school to apply to be
Right, that,
recognized.
that is a possibility. However, I can't say yes, all midwifery schools start applying,
Right,
because there's more that
exactly.
would go into the approval of a school and whether site
I
visits
agree.
were required and if that was a possibility
Right.
and if the documentation would be supported.
Yeah.
That would require further research from the medical board staff to determine if approving additional schools is even an option.
Right, but it could at least be initiated, and that might be.
A discussion could be initiated to see what the
Yes,
options are.
yes. So that might be a way that you could, approach your school and see if they were willing to become approved or initiate a process towards approval.
I think
Right.
we should
It
work
would
on
be
that anyway.
whether or not the school felt like it was worth
That's
the
right.
effort,
That's
frankly.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if they're not going to have a lot of students coming from there to here, I just don't, I think we have a lot more
I think they'd be
success
coming in droves if
getting
we did
National
it.
Midwifery Institute
I
to,
think we would
get on
rather go
board
to
here.
Canada.
Okay,
So-
well, thank you for your time, and maybe
Thank
I'll
you.
take it up further with Natalie. Thanks.
okay. Are you finished, Ms. Webb, or do you have more?
I am.
Any other comments? Okay. And we have that update on the licensed midwives interested parties meeting by Ms. Lowe.
So some of the information Carrie already provided, which I won't go repeat that. So we did have the last meeting December 15th. As she mentioned, that a lot of good information was obtained, but we really are not moving forward at this moment. As for the transfer reporting form, as Carrie mentioned, that we will be setting up an interested parties meeting, hopefully in the next couple months, to address those specific needs so we can actually get that moving forward. With that, as we have not really had the focus on the transfer form during the interested parties meeting, we haven't done as much outreach to the hospitals and to the public that we would like on the transfer reporting form. We've also not updated our website with additional information because it's still somewhat unclear of what the requirements are actually going to be on that reporting form. So after this next interested parties meeting, I think we'll have a clear understanding of what will be required on the form and how the process will flow. So that will be coming. Once we can set a date, as always, we will notice the meeting on the board's website and send out notice to the public, and also through the subscribers list. That concludes my update with the information that Carrie provided. Are there any questions? No? Okay.
Hey, now we'll move
From the
on.
public?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody out there, no. Okay. So now the program update.
Okay. So board staff, we've been working on updating the initial application for midwives, which they would submit. Currently, it's the paper version. That's the only option available. There have been some new laws that have gone into effect at the beginning of the year, so we're implementing those changes onto the form. While we're doing that, we're also going to be reviewing the entire application to make sure that everything is up to date and there's not questions that are being asked that should no longer be asked, or vice versa, that we need to be adding some additional questions to clarify issues. So that'll be happening hopefully in the next few weeks so that we can get into compliance with the new laws that went into effect.
What, can you clarify more what those are?
I don't have the specific sections of law that have changed, but for an example, the I-10 number is now required for any applicants to have the ability, which is an identification number versus a social security number. So we're going to be adding fields on our application forms to have them provide that
The
information.
NPI?
No, it's not an NPI, it's I-10. Yeah, it's a different way of obtaining status here in the United States.
So do we all have to have one of those?
No.
Oh, okay. If you're not a citizen, okay, got it.
The I-10 is actually designed for the DREAM Act children who are here.
Oh, okay.
And they are, if they meet certain requirements, they're eligible to get an I-10, which will allow them to apply for licensures. And that's not just for midwives, it's for all of our license types. So it doesn't change their immigration status. It allows them to work. So
My question is.
they apply for it
is a-
through immigration. It's
Right.
part of the DREAM Act, the Federal DREAM Act, and the state legislature adopted that as a method of meeting the Social Security number requirements. So that is a requirement that we have to add to our applications.
Right, because they can't get a social security number
Right.
because they don't have a birth certificate. Got it.
But they
Okay.
still have to fit into a certain criteria to get
Got it.
that. Some of the other items have to do with being in the military or being a spouse or registered partner of someone in the military, which allows expedited license. Sometime, or if you're in the military, you can get a fee exemption if you're only going to practice on a military or federal location. So there's some of those things our applications have to be updated on.
Oh, okay. Are things, so we still can't, as midwives, apply online through Breeze, right?
No, you can't.
And we can't renew that way either, right?
No, you can't.
So how long are renewals taking? I sort of have a dog in the, yeah, when will we be able to on Breeze?
Question.
Okay, never mind. Well.
Okay, I'll provide an update.
Okay, I have one other question. How long are renewals taking to process?
It just depends. So if your renewal is sent to the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is a PO box address, it's going to go through their remittance processor, which is, I would say, probably a couple weeks, which is acceptable. If it doesn't meet the requirements to go through their machine process, they are then sent to the medical board to be processed manually. So some renewals are facing a delay due to some system constraints, but they are then processed in-house manually. I would say right now, there may be a 2-week backlog at the most for renewals that are mailed in either to the board or to DCA, as far as I know.
Okay, because my check was cashed more than a month ago and I don't have my license yet.
Now, what will happen though is if we're cashiering your renewal in-house, we send it down. It takes about 7 to 10 days for it to actually reflect that your license has been updated. So at that time, your check would be cashed. Then it would be, the data would be extracted the following week to our print vendor, and your pocket card or your renewal certificate would then be sent out. So we notify our licensees and that it's about a 2 to 4 week time to receive your actual card or renewal
Okay.
certificate.
It's probably in my mailbox when I get home. Okay.
If it's not, you just go ahead and send me an email.
Okay, Natalie. Thank
I'll
you.
look at it.
Thank you.
There's a lot of issues that are continuing to occur with Breeze, that certain extracts don't get completed correctly, and then our print vendor doesn't get the data correctly, and so there's a lot of manual work
A lot
that's
of
involved with
staff time.
staff reviewing the information to make sure that we're getting the correct stuff out.
Let me ask you a question vis-à-vis Breeze and the barriers to getting it done online. Does this mean that everything that's being done is on top of, if Breeze had been able to do it, you wouldn't have to do it?
Yes and no. We will most likely always require a paper application. And maybe I'm mistaken here. Are you talking about the changes that we're making to the application or the actual renewal issues?
The actual renewal.
The renewal issues are issues that we are waiting the completion of the requested changes. So there's issues that we've submitted tickets on that are pending, and once those are resolved, hopefully we'll eliminate some of this back and forth where the renewal gets sent to DCA and then to us. So it's coming up.
Just sounding like double work, which is meaning double time.
That's correct.
And are renewals done at one specific time period during the year? Like a specific quarter? Is it ongoing?
No, there's renewals that are generated monthly, so because the expiration date is based on the birth month, then the renewals are opened approximately 120 days prior to your expiration date. So during that time, we're continuously getting renewals daily, weekly, and those are processed as quickly as possible, whether they're in-house or at DCA.
Would it be of any benefit, staff-wise, labor-intensive-wise, to have it a specific amount of, to merge into a system by which there is only 1 quarter of the year that you could apply for renewal?
I don't see that being a benefit as.
Okay, if it's not a benefit, then it's not a benefit.
Right, because then it would just be dealing with a mass amount in a short period of time versus spreading it out over 12 months. That's my opinion. Hopefully, though, what will resolve this issue is once we can get the transactions online and we can start pushing these applications and renewals to be done online. Basically, if it's for physician and surgeon renewals that are online, the process is basically seamless. So medical board never has to touch that money that comes in for the majority of them. And that's our goal, obviously, is to get the transactions out there.
Super. Thank you. Does anybody else have questions on this particular thing? No. Great.
Okay, so that's basically my Breeze update, which I just mentioned, but I'm going to go, I'm going to back up a little bit. That kind of general program update information. So we're reviewing the application. We're also working to get the licensees to provide their LMARs. And as mentioned, the expiration date is coming up of March 30th, or the due date. So we sent out this year, we sent out letters in January. We also followed up in
A couple weeks ago.
I think it was the beginning of March, as soon as we could do it. We provided another update. We've asked for, everyone to get the word out as much as possible. So as of probably this morning, maybe last night, there were 363 reports expected to be submitted, and of those, 238 had been done, which leaves 125 that still have not been submitted. Now, the due date is March 30th, and of those 125, we don't know who has and who hasn't at this point, who has not submitted, because we don't get that data until after the end date. So again, I would just put the word out that if anyone has contacts to social media or telephone or in-person communication, get those reports submitted. And as we mentioned last year, after we were discussing the reports received and the results, the main issue with this is that if the reports are not received by March 30th and the system is closed, all of the reports that trickle in after that that end date, they do not actually go into the printed results. So you're not going to get reliable information And
Don't have
we
that.
just really wanted to push this year to get them in. So if any of those 125 that have not reported are listening, please go onto the website and get that completed.
I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like it would be that hard a thing for, at the 15th of March for OSHPD to say, these are the reports we have, and then you'd know who they didn't have, and you could send them individually a note.
Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have the resources right now to get that data if they were to provide us that list, and I'm sure they would.
Okay.
But I can't see us, after sending out the 2 letters and following up
Okay,
and dealing
never
with the
mind.
issues, to do that. I would like to. Obviously, I would like to be able to do something like that. And maybe down the road, that would be an option for maybe next year. Because what we were facing this year with email addresses, which is the easiest form of communication for us, we can send out a mass email, was that with the Breeze system, those email addresses are not stored in the system. So as there's a place, there is a place for them to be stored. However, those fields are not completed at this time. So the information is not in the system. So what we're doing is, as we're getting renewals come in with the email addresses provided on them, we're adding them. But when we requested a list of all of the email addresses, I think we maybe had 36 or something like that. So we had to send out an actual letter by mail, and we did that a couple times, which
It's expensive.
it is
Hello.
expensive.
You
and
sent
the
it to
resources.
everyone, or just to the 125 you didn't have?
Send it to all of
Okay,
you.
but
We
I
sent it
wanna-
to
you
everyone.
sent- So you have sent some kind of communication to everybody,
Twice.
and you have not received back, unable to deliver any of those? They all were received?
We
and-
may have, I don't know off the top of my head. I know maybe a couple have come
A
back.
couple is
as
not a
that.
question, a big percentage is what I'm looking at.
No, not at all.
I would just like to let you know that I have sent 3 email blasts out to all whose email addresses I have. Rosanna Davis, who's the current president of the California Association of Midwives, sent one out to.
And it may,
Okay, I only got one.
I'm just concerned that a third of
we
the,
have- we have been
approximately a third
trying.
of the people you've not heard back from.
right, and it could come down to, of that 125, this is capturing, the total number of 363. That's for any licensee who is in a current or delinquent status. So some of these could be delinquent, and that they are not practicing in the state, and they are not planning on practicing in the state, so they're not complying with it. I think we have to take into consideration that that could be some of them. Also, I think our numbers are better than last year for this time, so it's an improvement, but
More likely they're going to do it this weekend.
hopefully.
Why? Why? What's special about this weekend?
But I just.
Because Monday's the
last
30th.
We have been bringing what resources we have out and trying to get to as many of the midwives as we possibly can.
Yeah,
Which we can only do so much, all of us, so.
Right.
Right. I
Those
mean,
individuals,
it-
it's
But
their
we're trying to
responsibility.
help.
And I would also like to remind that it is a requirement in the law. So those that are not submitting those forms, they actually are in violation of the law. There are consequences in that they cannot renew their license until it's completed. So it just really ends up making more work for everyone.
Well, and the really big thing is that if you don't submit your data by the 30th of March, and you wait until the 10th of April, you can still renew your license, but your data is not included in our statistics, and that's a really big deal. And I'd just like to remind every midwife out there that's listening to this, or who may hear that I said this later, that it's part of being professional to submit your data on time. Let's just do that.
Well, there's a hard fix, which is everybody renews on a certain date, and their LMAR is due a month before that, and if the LMAR isn't in, they don't renew. And you'd have to have the dates line up, and you'd have to have them all renew at the same time. but
Yeah.
Well, and it also may come down to, if it continues, that there's not a significant amount of reports being come in, that the board takes on future statutory changes to impose a disciplinary
Fine.
action or a fine for that, just like
Double
we have
your
for other
licensure
license
fee?
types.
Yeah.
Or a
Something,
citation
yeah.
being issued, or whatever the cause.
That
Do
would
we
have to
know
be-
how many, when you finally get the report and say there's 100 people that didn't do their report this year, do you know how many of those didn't do it last year or the year before on time either?
We can probably look into that. I know that last year we reached out to those individuals that didn't submit and provided another reminder. But that's kind of after it closes. So I think now we're starting to gather enough data over the last few years that we can look back and see if it's repeat offenders.
I would also like to suggest that, staff time is valuable. You don't have a lot of it to spend helping people fill out their LMAR a year or two after the fact so that they can get renewed. And they need to realize that if they're not sending their LMAR in a timely way when they can still do it online, that means they're going to have to come to the board and say, I need to submit my LMAR because I need to renew my license. And that might take a really long time, which may mean that they're going to have to stop practicing for a while because their license can't be renewed.
My concern is
Just
also,
saying.
though, is that without the data there, you still have the ability to say, we haven't received it, which makes it look worse. So it's not, we don't know that they're not practicing, we just know that they haven't done it. And what happens is that it just doesn't look professional. So I think that there's got to be a way down the road, when this is not March 31st, that the deadline is,
30th.
that there's a way of looking at the information and figuring out how do you pull out those that are no longer practicing, those that have moved out of state, those
Those
that
that
don't
have
want
died, we
Yeah,
got that
we have
too.
got to do this, because otherwise, no matter how good your data is, it just isn't complete.
Well, and I think we can review it on the end. However, when we provide the extract of our licensees to OSHPD, it's only those that are renewed and current. We have to include those that are, renewed and current and delinquent. We have to include those that are delinquent because they could be
You don't know why they're
one-day
delinquent.
delinquent,
but
or
you
they
don't
could
know
be
why they're
4.5
delinquent.
years. So individual
Issue-
review.
So I'm just suggesting that at some point, we should be able to figure out a way to pull names out that are no longer valid names statistically.
Yeah, like maybe the ones that haven't reported in the
People that are
last
dead
3
are
years.
never gonna
Well,
give you
and
reports.
that's what I'm trying to explain, is that we are only providing the numbers or the information of that 363 that only includes licensees that are renewed and current or in a delinquent status. It
And
does not
delinquent less
include-
than 5 years.
Correct, because after they're delinquent for
less than
5
5
years,
years.
they would become canceled. So we're not including canceled, we're not including deceased. However, if they become deceased after we report that information at the beginning of January, then maybe.
Or nobody tells you, and they're just delinquent
Right.
until 5 years has gone by, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we get it.
Okay.
I think that it's clear that a third not reporting is.
It's not good.
It's not good. It does not look good. And it doesn't help us in any way move the profession of midwifery forward in California. It just doesn't.
I hope we aren't saying that a third haven't reported yet this year, because so many people are going to, no, so many people are going to just wait until, they're not going to do it until the last minute.
Well,
So we
that's
still-
true, so.
This is
Then you
not
move the
final
deadline.
data.
Just change the deadline to March 1st. But you can't do that. You have to have it in. I mean,
Well, we'll know when we get the final report from OSHPD, which is what, July or something?
So hopefully there'll be a big push this weekend, but moving on, unless there's any other questions, to the licensing statistics. On page 16 of your packets, tab 10, we provide the licensing statistics. This quarter is being reported for October 1st through December 31st, and you'll see applications received jumped from 3 to 20 in that quarter, which was kind of exciting to see. I'm sure you were. We also have, at the end of the quarter, there was only 7 pending. So what that's telling you is there's basically no backlog of applications sitting. I know a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was a huge backlog, and there's at this time, absolutely no backlog for initial applications. It's submitted, it's reviewed within a couple days, and information's out to the applicant quickly to complete any deficiencies. Also of note, on the bottom of the page, you will see LM license statuses. We've taken your recommendations and requests, and we've provided all of our license statuses now. Before, we only listed renewed and current and delinquent. So you'll see the breakdown of all of the LM licenses that we have in our system. That is the breakdown of what we're seeing. So we'll continue to report that for future meetings as well.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
On the revoked, surrendered, deceased, that's cumulative, right? That's not like in the last 5 years or
Correct.
something?
It's a snapshot of the data as of now, how many are in these different status types.
And that would be from the beginning of the LM, correct?
Correct.
For those, okay, thank you.
Now, if a license was revoked and they petitioned and they came back and their license changed from revoked and
Then
they're
it'll
now
change.
current, obviously it's going to be in a different bucket now.
Right, but
Okay.
in terms of deceased, that's going to be an ongoing
Hopefully that'll
total.
stay.
I don't think, well, maybe they'll reincarnate and come back as a midwife.
Yeah, I just used Breeze and looked up a deceased person who still has a license, and it doesn't say deceased.
And I know it's
Dead for 2 years.
right,
Okay,
and I
it has
know
to
that
be
it's been
5.
brought up, it was brought up before, and what we've done is we've reached out to the family to provide the documentation. We also have other resources available to verify that information. Unfortunately, if we're unable to verify it through the computer system that we're utilizing, we have to go back to the family or find some documentation. And I can look into it again. I know it's been brought forward, and we've
Don't they
attempted
have
to get the
death-
information.
With a death certificate?
That's what you
Can't
have to have, is a
Isn't
death
that a
certificate.
public
Right, that's what we're
record?
attempting to get, either from the family or the estate, and if we can't,
Can't you get it from the county?
A Department of Health Services? I know,
that sounds like
government
an
agencies
easy,
don't talk
an
to
easy
That
answer I
sounds-
should be able to give you, but honestly, I don't know if we're able to reach out and get that information.
Okay.
I'll look into it.
Thank you.
And it's not because we don't want to, obviously, update that person. It's, we want to have all our ducks in a row before we change a status. Clarify. Unless there's any questions, I'll go ahead and move on to the enforcement statistics. So on page 17 of the packets, we provide the enforcement statistics, and I'm not sure if you'll remember or not, but at the last meeting, we informed you that we are including the statistics for the hospital transfer reporting form, and that we had put it into the chart at the last meeting, but we weren't satisfied with the formatting and that we'd be moving it. So now you'll see it's the first line on the report, and it's in its own section. So those numbers are being pulled out, so they're not being included in complaints received, because they're not complaints received technically. So you'll see that in the first quarter, there's 53, and that number dropped down to 22. Honestly, we don't know the rhyme or the reason of why the numbers dropped so significantly, except it was a brand-new requirement, and there's a big push for it. With that number, though, I would just want to point out again that the board is going to be pursuing more outreach for these forms and also providing more clarification. I think one of the issues may have been that in that first quarter, we were seeing a lot of reports being submitted for RNs and other CNMs and not specifically LMs, and that has now been cleared out of that data somewhat, so that could be a reason. But we'll be providing more outreach, hopefully. The other enforcement numbers, I don't think there's anything significant to point out. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
So I'd just like to say, in terms of the hospital reporting forms, since licensed midwives are not required by law to provide them to the hospital or sign them or have anything really to do with them at all, it might not be a bad idea for us to just print it out and fill in our information and hand it to the receiving person at the hospital when we transfer. At least then we know they got to fill it out and our information is correct, while we're sorting out all the rest of getting hospitals to understand they have to do it, how to do it, what to put on the form. If we're filling it out with our information ahead of time and providing it to them, there's a better chance that it'll be done properly.
Wasn't there some discussion of having the midwives do that and being able to sign a section of it so that they are verifying that they also agree with what is being reported?
Yeah, there's been several discussions, and I don't know if we want to go into that here, but I would remind everyone that we're going to be holding an interested parties meeting, and I think that that would be the place that we bring up these issues on, what we want on the form and review the laws to determine if there's any requirement that the hospital fill it out versus the LM prior to getting there. But those will be something that we'll be prepared with at the interested parties meeting.
Thank you.
So can I ask you a question on the enforcement statistics? So with last year's numbers, 26 complaints were received and 21 complaints were closed, leaving you therefore with 5 complaints, correct? Mathematically, that works out, I think. 21 from 26 is 5. So that the question I have, though, is,
But before you go on, I don't think you can look at it that way necessarily, because the complaints received are not necessarily the same complaints that are being closed. So
Okay, so
complaints are
that's
coming in
okay.
different quarters and being closed in different quarters.
thank you.
So that concludes my update, unless anyone has questions.
Public comment?
Anybody on the council have comments on this? No. All right. So we are going to move the presentation by Diane Holzer on best practices for home-to-hospital transfers to the next MAC meeting. It'll be on the next agenda. And that brings us to agenda items for the next Midwifery Advisory Council meeting, which is currently scheduled for the 13th of August. So we'll already have the standing agenda items: update from the chair, update on the midwifery program, update on midwifery licensure or legislative events that are happening, update on AB 1308 and how it's moving forward. We need to put on that agenda further discussion and for consideration of sending the LMAR report to the full board. And anybody else on the MAC want to add something to that?
Further update on the challenge?
Okay.
You want to do an update also on the outcomes for interested parties or staff decision on the updates of this?
Yeah. So update on
LMAR revisions, can we get IT and/or OSHPD here for a better picture of what is and isn't going to be possible and what kind of timeline?
I think part of that will depend on what the staff report looks like and
Yeah,
whether or not we
that's true.
have a interested parties meeting
But it
between now and
could-
then.
Right, but it could be.
It could be part of that,
A part of the
absolutely.
agenda items that
Yeah.
we're going to be.
Well, it would be included in the update and
I think the expectation is
consideration of
that
the
there is
LMAR.
going to be a staff update.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is there is going to be an interested parties meeting, so therefore there would be an expectation of this, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought completely. You had something, Barbara, I'm sorry, and I missed.
No, you did, you took care of it. Going to have an update on the LMAR,
Oh, in the interested parties meetings.
and the interested
Um,
parties meeting, the staff update.
I just want to clarify, are we planning another interested parties meeting for the referral regulations and a separate one for the hospital
Hospital.
form? Or are we going to try to do them all at the same time again?
Right now, I don't think there's another interested parties meeting contemplated for the 2507 regulations.
The referral one?
Yeah. There is an interested party meeting that will be scheduled for the hospital forum only.
Okay. So how are we going to move forward with the list of conditions to refer for if we're not going to have another interested parties meeting?
I didn't say that we're not going to. Right now, it's not
It's not in the
It's
works?
not in the works. It's,
I'm just trying to understand what the process for moving that forward is.
Is it
and
appropriate
I guess I
on this
didn't get it
web-
earlier.
Is it appropriate that once staff goes through the recommendations as they are today, and they make a decision what can and cannot or possibly work, that this could be disseminated then via email or via something to the organized midwifery community throughout the state, asking them to respond in writing to staff?
you're talking about the Elmar
Yeah.
now.
That you're not contemplating interested parties for?
No, we're talking about
Something different.
Oh, sorry.
We are contemplating an interested parties meeting for this. I was asking about the list that we need to put into regulation for when a licensed midwife must refer to a physician for particular diseases and conditions. And I should have asked about this, I suppose, during your presentation, Ms. Webb, on this point, but now I'm unclear how we're moving that regulation forward, what the plan is for moving it forward, or maybe we don't, yeah. I heard that there's no agreement. I heard that. But I'm wondering if you have suggestions for how the midwifery community could come together in a different way to make it move forward. Perhaps how the physicians community could come together in a different way to make it move forward. Or is it going to go the way of the dictate by law to define an appropriate level of physician supervision for midwives that was required in 2003 and never got implemented because nobody could come to an agreement? I mean, like, where are we with this, or are we just, sorry.
I think we are getting off track for the agenda item.
Yeah, I recognize that. I'm backing up.
Right.
And if I can't, you can just say that. That's okay. But I didn't get that information earlier, and I didn't realize I needed it earlier.
I think we do need some kind of compromise between ACOG and the midwifery community to have regulations move forward in a successful way.
Okay.
And I know Ms. Simoes has a comment.
For Ms. Kirkmeyer, since she's not here right now, we've discussed this, and I think we're at the point where staff kind of needs to go back and kind of see what our options are, because we were hoping that some kind of consensus would be reached, and we've kind of just heard, just in the last couple of days, that it's not been, and so we need to kind of go back and see what our options, so I don't think we're really ready to say this is what we're going to do yet. We're kind of at the point of we're just kind of thinking about what our options are, and then, maybe at the next meeting we can report on the next update.
Okay. So it's appropriate to have an update on it again. That's good. Okay.
Yes,
And
it'll continue to be an agenda item till it's
I'm
resolved.
sure if there's some other meeting that we all need to be at, that you guys will let us know, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So along those lines, reading, while I can, the stated mission of the Medical Board of California is to promote access to quality medical care through the board's licensing and regulatory functions, and we're talking about regulation here. We have to be really careful with regulatory language, that it's not actually promoting the denial of access to licensed midwives, so that consumers are not getting the care that they want. And if that's contrary to the stated mission of the medical board, is that not
We bring it back
a no
to the agenda
mover
items.
in
Okay.
I mean, I don't think
Tosi,
that-
I have to interrupt you because I brought us way off topic, and I'm sorry. We should have had this conversation
Okay. I just
during
wanted
this.
to say
Webb's
about
update.
the regulatory process is that it is a process, it takes time, and it takes a lot of back and
Compromise.
forth.
Yeah, thank you.
But it shouldn't compromise the stated mission of the medical board, and by association, us as an advisory council.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want on the agenda for our next meeting?
Up in the interim, I'm sure staff would, you would be in contact with staff, and anything changes or additions you need to make. You don't have to make your final decision today.
Okay. Great. And just to clarify, Ms. Lowe, you're going to be sending something out to the MAC members about the interim meeting, is that correct? And notice it and all of that stuff. So we should look for that.
I'd like clarification on what the problem is with moving ahead with the meeting as scheduled.
The problem is that if we do that, we can't submit the LMAR report to the board until after the deadline to make any changes
In September.
in September.
It's
It's a timing issue.
If we have a phone meeting, can we have that on the discussion and keep the August meeting the way it is? Or are we only having a phone meeting to change the August meeting?
So the interim meeting would be it's been requested to change the date of the next meeting. I think that we want to probably limit it to that specific item, as it's going to be a teleconference meeting, and I think this is a major issue that people will want to chime in on, and we would want available public comment, a little bit more participation than a telephone conference call. So that also will give us time to do our research that we need to do. So for that interim meeting that we will be holding, we'll come up with some dates that work for everyone involved, and then we'll go through the usual process of noticing it and sending it out by subscriber email.
Okay, and I'd just like to say for the record, Monique, that if your baby arrives before the next meeting and you want to bring your baby with you at the breast, that is completely agreeable.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have any questions, comments on that? All right. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.